Brilliant. Thank you, James. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. So in this talk, we're going to talk about a project that we've been working on for the past few years, with focus on supporting student learning in statistics within our psychology courses here at Nottingham, through a redesign of aspects of the learning environment and also providing opportunities within the curriculum for students to engage with their learning throughout. So I'm going to start off by presenting the objectives of the project and the approach that we took, what we did, and how we've evaluated the impact. So looking at student experiences of learning statistics within psychology through the literature and our own experience, this is often associated with feelings of anxiety towards aspects of the course and lower levels of efficacy in learning and understanding and applying that knowledge. And often we see reduced engagement in relation to this aspect of their degree. Now, what we wanted to do when we first started this project is use an evidence-based approach to try and identify the sources of those challenges through a qualitative research paradigm and identify where we can tackle support, and specifically looking at the teaching and assessment provision. So our objective was to design assessment that was authentic and that was fit for purpose, that supports students' learning. So a bit of background on how this module is run. So when we first took over the module a few years ago, this was originally assessed. It's a year-long module. It's still a year-long module where students engage in weekly teaching through lectures, and this is also aligned with another module where they do practical classes. So learning about research methods, about statistics in our modules, and then applying that knowledge in practical classes. Now, originally, this was assessed via a 3-hour written exam at the end of the academic year. So we contacted some focus groups with students before embarking on any changes, where we engage with discussions with students currently enrolled in the course. So statistics forms a key part both of the undergraduate and the postgraduate curriculum. So we invited undergraduate and postgraduate students, as well as students who completed the course in the previous year. So we asked them about their experiences and any concerns they might have around the course. So through those focus groups, we've identified some 4 areas, let's say, of key concerns and challenges experienced by students. So firstly, the concepts, and particularly the maths and the theory behind statistical tests. Students also reported lower levels of anxiety as we expected from the literature. So if I saw a data set, for example, how do I analyze the data? If I get an output, how can I then apply that knowledge in that context? So the learning environment was another source where students found challenges. So students welcomed and talked about the benefits of having more interactive sessions rather than lectures. So they wanted opportunities within the curriculum to come in, practice content, talk to other people, get some feedback on the process, and opportunities to apply what they're learning, aligned, of course, with the assessment. Students have said when you actually put it into practice, you realize you can actually do statistics. And the most significant source of worry that we found was around the assessment. So how the assessment was designed previously, this led students to adopt practices which were not very efficient. So adopting an assessment focused approach to teaching. I will learn the content closer to the exam. So they wanted more continuous assessment, separated out and given opportunities to apply their knowledge, get some feedback, understand any challenges they may experience, and apply that in the next piece of work. So an aspect that we focused on with the redesign of the curriculum for the statistics course, and which is also the focus of our talk today, is around revising assessment. So we wanted to move away from traditional assessment to designing more diverse, more authentic assessment and assessment for learning. So not just the endpoint in a module or a course, but encouraging engagement throughout a particular course. So we wanted to provide students with opportunity to reflect on what they're learning, to apply that knowledge, and opportunities for feedback throughout. So we've separated the assessment into smaller components. We have the more heavy credit-bearing assessments at the end of each semester, but we also introduced some formative assessments the first year. They were embedded within the curriculum. So these took the form of peer assessment activities and a self-assessment activities. So we wanted students to actively engage with the learning. So the focus on here was peer assessment, collaborating with others, both within and outside the classroom, to be able to self-assess the progress, the learning through engagement with assessment criteria and exemplars. So, Chris?
All right, I'll take over for a bit now of presenting. So to tell you a bit about what these assessments were that we kind of newly created and added to this course. So effectively what we did is we gave people a research question and the statistical output that goes with it. And the student is asked to write the results section that would kind of go along with answering that research question given the output provided. So they don't actually need to do anything in the statistics program itself. It's all in front of them. It is more figured how to interpret it and turn this into something understandable. And like you'd see in a research paper, the actual results section there. So for this peer assessment activity, students were asked to do this and submitted their response in advance of a particular lecture session, where we then gave them first 2 exemplar responses that were based off of student submissions, but changed a bit to help with not singling out any particular student, as well as one that was a more complete answer. And then we asked the students, either individually or in small groups, to try and evaluate this themselves using the marking criteria provided, which is the same criteria that we also use in later assessments based on the same overall approach. And in this session, then we followed it with a Q&A portion to ask students kind of more open-endedly what questions they had and kind of if they have any concerns or they didn't follow along with how we came to do that overall approach. So when they were given these 2 exemplar responses, we also then gave them time to fill in a Microsoft Forms that we'd set up. It's identical for each of the questions, but you can see one of them here. And effectively, we have a breakdown of different aspects of what we'd expect, in this case, for an ANOVA results write-up. We have to have something about the research design, making sure that the assumptions of the ANOVA are met, summarizing some of the means and standard deviations and overall statistics, if there's an interaction, if there's simple main effects, and then some sort of brief conclusion or broader interpretation, and then writing some other comments if they have any. And the intention with these 2 examples is that one needed quite a bit more of help in kind of things you're missing, and the other one was more complete, but still had some aspects lacking, but also quite similar to what most students would submit. So from these responses then, we can see that our kind of color-coded thing in this bar across horizontally now is if something's completely missing, not at all, then that's in more towards kind of a dark orange or red. We have something being present but incomplete, present is mostly complete, and finally present, complete, and accurate, which is the dark blue. So you can see for the first question, students were quite good at being able to assess that a lot of things were missing. And for the second question, it was kind of divided between kind of being somewhat confident then that it was complete, or if it was getting there but missing some elements. And then along with this, then we kind of finally went to what we had as a complete answer. And just to kind of give a better overview there, effectively we had a complete write-up that we would have effectively given full marks to, along with some kind of annotations to point out what are the different aspects that we were there, noting some things that are overall good, and kind of giving students an idea of what they should plan to have in their answer as they go forward. And a key element here is that in the actual exam that would kind of come at the end now of each semester, half of the exam is a question kind of analogous to this. For the first exam, it's based off of ANOVA results. They're given the same kind of information in terms of an overall kind of background of a question, research design, and then the related statistical output. And this is meant to basically be a practice in advance that is formative, but otherwise completely the same as it would expect for them to do on their own in the exam. Whereas here they can, again, also discuss it in small groups and have this opportunity to kind of develop it and see what they're doing and get feedback overall as a kind of overall group approach, rather than maybe otherwise procrastinating and not really trying to dive in until too close to the exam and posting questions or emailing and being a bit frantic. This is now part of the actual course that's done sufficiently before the exam. They have hands-on experience themselves. So that was the peer assessment activity that in this earlier year of us going through it, we did in the first semester. In the second semester, we used a slightly different approach, partly to see how students received them. And the overall design, at least what students do before the kind of interactive bit, was the same. They're given a research question and statistical output. This time, in 1 year is for exploratory factor analysis. Some other years we've done this with multiple regression instead, but basically concepts that we kind of newly address in the second semester of the module. And here, after they've submitted their best attempt, prior to getting any feedback or still kind of working on their own, then once they've submitted their answer, they get access to a pre-recorded video, in this case kind of done by me, and you'll see that in the next slide, that discusses the thought process in terms of going, basically scrolling up and down through the statistical output, pulling out the elements that are needed, and in kind of stepwise writing those into the actual results section. And then again, after the session, well, this was done kind of on your own, but after this was put online, then we did a Q&A in one of the following lecture sessions. So just give you kind of a screenshot of what that looked like. You can see kind of on the left, and most of it there, the width of the screen is the statistical output. Then we show me talking about it. Well, doesn't only kind of shows in a still, but me kind of narrating this through about a 10-minute video, and section by section, adding to the results section as I go through it. As I was doing it, I made a mistake and looked at one of the wrong tables at one point. I put a big annotation, but then also kind of highlighted easy mistakes you can make. So there I kind of at one point confused the rotated factor table versus the original one that's pre-rotation, and then put a big annotation that's like, I'm going a bit off there, but also tried to, in some ways, make it relatable and catch some errors out that are quite easy to make, and the tables all look the same. So that was the part for, I don't know why that, I can see it. So that was all the first year of us adding these additional formative assessments. In the following year, unfortunately, this ended up being the first academic year that we were fully within COVID kind of times. And as a result, a lot of things were pre-recorded videos already in that academic year. So mainly related to that, because students did receive the video exercise well, and we have some feedback on the focus groups forthcoming, like it's in the next slides, I mean. But because there were so many asynchronous videos, we decided to switch this activity from being kind of one of each type to both of them being a peer assessment. And now as a whole, we changed it so these were actually worth some proportion of the final grade, still intended to be a formative assessment, but we graded as just, did the student make a reasonable attempt? So far every year, anyone who submitted something has made a reasonable attempt. And even if it's incomplete, as long as they try to do something, they get the marks. And it's just to kind of improve engagement with the marking criteria at this earlier stage, kind of midway through each respective semester, rather than not thinking about it or just knowing that an answer is available and not really looking at them until a little bit too close to the exam. So overall now, instead of the kind of 2 years ago version, where it was 100% of the mark for this full year course was based off a single 3-hour exam, now divided into 4 components, 2 of those each per semester basically, is a peer assessment where it's just, again, make your best attempt, and you get 5% for each of those for trying. And then there's the actual main assessments in terms of having an exam that's half multiple choice, half short answer, and these short answer questions are again made to be analogous to the peer assessment activity, and each of those exams is worth 45% of the final grade. So then altogether we have 100 again, but I've broken it up into a few pieces rather than having kind of one exam that's after a whole year of learning. We have it kind of semester-wise, and again, these peer assessments to get people to engage with the marking criteria, discuss it with each other in small groups, and try and figure out what we're going for a bit earlier on than waiting to just the exam time. And now I'll give it back to Stephanie.
So following those changes, we wanted to get some input from students on what the impact has been on their learning and their student experience overall. So adding that weighting that Chris spoke about between years led to increased engagement in the formative tasks, which was a positive thing for the module overall. So we asked students about this specific activities, the peer assessment tasks, and the self-assessment the first year they were contacted. Now, overall, students found that engaging with this activity supported their learning and their understanding of content, as well as the preparation for the assessment. So firstly, with the peer assessment task, having the opportunity to engage with the scenario, to write an answer, interpret an output, and present that result section scientifically, it supported their learning, firstly, by enabling them to put knowledge into practice, but also identifying what areas do I still find challenging and tackling those. So one quote we have here is helpful seeing how it gets put into actual example practice. So engaging with the marking criteria, engaging with the resources associated with the peer assessment task, both within the session and outside of the session, supporting students in identifying what do I expect in an exam and what is expected of me. So increased understanding towards the marking criteria and to get some practice. And some students commented the collaborative nature of the peer assessment task, getting together in groups and discussing content and how that's applying to practice, supported their learning. So some students said this was actually quite positive, a positive experience. And with regards to self-assessment activity, students spoke quite positively about this, having someone walk through information step by step, outlining the thought process of this is the scenario, this is how you derive the answer, this is how you interpret the output, the theory behind it. That was really helpful and helped them in applying that to their own work. So some students commented that the resources offered a form of feedback for their own work. Now, engaging with these activities also supported self-efficacy around applying content. So some students said in our focus group, they're now confident enough to do this themselves, and not within the current assessment, but also thinking about their final year, their undergraduate research project or the postgraduate project, understanding how to do this and applying that to practice. And overall, when thinking about skills they developed through the course, having engaged with various aspects of the module of the course, it supported development of skills such as critical thinking when reading papers that they could apply to other modules beyond statistics. Now, that's all the positives. A few areas left to address as identified through the focus group. So although a number of students mentioned that the use of the marking scheme, of the exemplars, of the annotated results section, that served as a form of feedback that I could then apply to my own work. Some students said, well, I wish I got more personalized feedback, even if it's just brief comments on what I have personally submitted. A few students spoke about I wanted to know what the right answer is, not so much engage with the actual peer assessment activity. And we also had a few comments around, I didn't look at the marking criteria before writing my answer, which I probably should have done. So moving forward.
Just give you a 5-minute warning, Stephanie.
Thank you, James. So moving forward, this is just one aspect that we have redesigned. We also have other elements where we're adopting active learning, blended learning resources to support students. But focusing on this aspect, there are reported benefits to the new assessment methods that we've introduced. A couple of aspects to address, just specifying, making a bit clearer to students what is the purpose of engaging with such activities and the importance of focusing on the assessment criteria rather than using a specific answer as a template, for example, and further encouraging students to self-assess their own work and reflect on their progress throughout. Some references and acknowledgements. Thank you very much.